level. The big story tonight, a two-day conference on global election systems began today at the Sankara Hotel in Nairobi with senior legislators, among them Senate Majority Leader Kipchumba Murkomen and his minority counterpart James Orengo being in attendance. The theme of the summit is rethinking democracy as it seeks to enhance democracy through free and fair elections. The irony, however, is that the Kenyan Parliament has failed to institute a process to reinvigorate the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. In fact, IEBC nears 1 year since its commissioners began resigning. So far, the agency that had 7 commissioners has just 3, and in October this year, Ezra Chiloba was fired as IEBC CEO. His departure left the ailing commission in an even more precarious situation. But both the executive and parliament are showing little or no effort to restructure IEBC. Is this a case of insincere democracy on the part of Kenya? Senators Murkomen and Orengo speak to that question.
But I think if you have an electoral body where the stakeholders and the political parties and civil society have a role, even after the electoral body has been put in place, we may be able to oversee and oversight the work more effectively. I think the distinction between the executive and the electoral body, I think this continues to muddy the election waters.
This is where we disagree with Senator Orengo. I personally think we sent home the best commission we ever had as a country, which was headed by very committed persons and people who were hardworking and people who were more independent, who would really absorb the pressure of elections. Once we did so, we recommended also that the commissioners will be identified by religious leaders because we thought that they were going to be impartial. Even went further and said only once. So today, if you wanted to replace the new commissioners, agreeing on the process of replacing the new commissioners is first a problem.
Well, on the short tonight, I shall be speaking to 2 elections experts, Marcus Agenga from the Elections Observation Group and lawyer Felix Odhiambo was also a senior program manager at the National Democratic Institute. But as usual, before I engage the able panel, I bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Onuna, who has just spoken to National Assembly Minority Leader John Mbadi on the same matter.
Michelle, so today there was a conference and it's ongoing in Nairobi on international trends in elective systems. Now, this, of course, is good in terms of big picture to look at electoral issues. But one of the concerns with this coming at this particular time is that in Kenya, the IEBC remains in shambles. For the period preceding the 2017 general elections and for the last 1 year, it has been a disastrous playing out in terms of the commission. We've seen 4 of them resign, well, 3 attempted to go back. And then the CEO as well fired by the 2 remaining commissioners and the chairman. All this while, there is no law in place to facilitate the hiring of new commissioners. Why is that the case? Well, let me speak tonight to the leader of minority in the National Assembly, that's John Mbadi. Thank you, sir, for making time for us.
Thank you.
We are looking at some of these conversations going on in these conferences, and yet one would wonder, as Kenya looks to find and discuss best practice on election trends around the world, our own situation at home is in dire straits. And elections in Kenya, we've seen loss of life, destruction of property. What's going on in your view?
I think it is important that we appreciate the crisis that we are in terms of electoral management in this country, more particularly that we don't have a functioning electoral body. And I think it is high time that now we took it up as a matter of urgency. We know there is no legal framework in place to really constitute a new commission. But even if there was a legal framework, there is no political agreement, or rather political discourse that has resulted into a position that our country has taken in terms of how then do we put a commission in place. Our party has a clear position on how we want the new IEBC to be constituted. There's no doubt in our mind that this IEBC as it is today cannot do any reasonable electoral process, whether it is a referendum or it is a general election. But I want to be very categorical that as a party we are expecting a referendum soon, and before that referendum we must have a new IEBC in place. Without that, then it would be impossible for us to have a successful referendum, or a referendum that is credible enough that we can all say that was conducted properly. Yeah. So as a party, we are soon going to pronounce ourselves on how we want it to go. I would only just give you a bit of insights as to what we are thinking, and we are very clear as a party that for the moment the new IEBC need to be formed in a line that we formed the ECK through PPG of was it 1997, which resulted into a more credible, successful election of 2002. I think the first one that this country has had faith in. So ODM stands for IEBC that would be constituted by political parties coming together and producing commissioners. We have realized as a party that there is no one whom you will pick from this country unless we bring foreigners, which again Kenyans are not agreeable to. That you can get any person in this country who is neutral, who has no political leaning.
So in essence, for those who do not understand, IPPG is when overtly each party chooses commissioners. So we know Commissioner A is proposed by ODM, exactly, Jubilee and other parties. Yes. But let's come back to, you describe this as a crisis, and many see it that way. So why isn't there a movement now? What are we waiting for as a country? Because as you say, there's talk about a referendum. We're 4 years away from 2022. Isn't this the time to fix IEBC? Why isn't it being taken seriously? Leaders like yourselves bringing it up so that it can be resolved.
You have mentioned and made a very good point, that why is it that as leaders we are seeing a crisis and we are not dealing with it now? You know, I think Kenyans need to realize that there are a lot of things that we are trying to do at the same time. I remember the handshake between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta took place on 9th of March after a very charged political environment and atmosphere. You need to create time to allow that kind of agreement, that kind of coming together to gel, people to gel and to sync and to settle. If you start rattling it with very serious proposals on how we need to constitute a commission, then you can lose it. Even a very good idea can be lost.
Really? And we're already talking about a referendum which is more significant?
Yes, if you listen to me a bit, I would remind you that that referendum is not coming today. Before the referendum, we will sort out these issues of who sits in the commission, or how do we constitute or reconstitute the commission. But what I'm saying is, immediately you do the handshake, you want to start working together, and you started raising, we want IEBC to be reformed, and this is the way we want to do it. Quickly, you are going to give room to those who are detractors and people who are averse or are not agreeable to the handshake. And by the way, we have enough enemies of handshake in this country. We are not short of them. But as it is, look, the president started on a process which was also very important, of fighting corruption, which was one of the items or one of the key areas that they had agreed on together with Raila Odinga that need to be addressed. We are talking about the 14-member team which has just started moving across the country to get Kenyans' views. So if you brought quickly at the same time, it's like you are trying to feed someone who has been hungry for a long time, and you want to give that person too much food at the same time. Chances are that that person would vomit, or even your child, if that is the way you want to feed your child, you are going to cause that child constipation. So what I think now we need to engage in as a country, and we have to develop a bipartisan approach to this, that we need a new IEBC in place. How we are going to get it, we need to sit around the table. And as a party, I've just told you that we have discussed, in fact, in our last Central Committee meeting, if I have to divulge and say a little about it, it is something that we discussed. We discussed the issue of IEBC, and as a party, we are thinking of seriously communicating our position. I know as the chairman, if you look at our constitution, it is my mandate, it is within my responsibility to articulate party policy. So I will definitely communicate that in the new course.
Yeah, because it should be an urgent matter, seeing as the process you're talking about going around the country, that could go on for some time. Yes. So IEBC is an important issue. But you talk about the political class coming together with the IPPG approach to form the next IEBC. You see that as a solution, but some would see the political class as a problem. For instance, this IEBC, it was because as ODM, NASA said you would not go to the last election with that commission. So it was paid out, the deal was reached, they went. Then in January, the joint committee came up with a law that only covers this election and with these commissioners. We've seen 4 resign. It has been disastrous, drama after drama, leaked memos, if you like. So reconcile for someone watching and who's been following these developments and says, the politicians put us here in the first place. How can the same politicians be the solution?
No, I don't think so. But by the end of the day, this is a political discourse. I mean, this is a political engagement. You cannot remove politicians from it. We may get it wrong as politicians. Kenya, you cannot go to Mars and bring other people to be politicians in Kenya. The people you will deal with are the current Kenyan politicians. So we just have to make do with what we have. But I want to just take you back a little, that yes, we pushed for the removal of the other commission to bring in this new commission. But you remember where we came from. There was a problem with the other commission. But the fact that we had a problem with the other commission did not stop us from having problem with this one. But that does not mean we'll give up. We'll still have to fight to get it right. I think where we got it wrong is on the constitution of the commission. But we did very well in other electoral reforms, like the issue of IT, which really helped us to even identify and even be able to successfully challenge the outcome of the presidential election in this country, something that has never happened in Africa before. So Kenya set a precedent. Why? Because of some of the legal changes that we made just prior to election. If we did not go ahead to make some electoral reforms, we would have not even known where there was rigging or fraud or whatever it is. So to me, I think we made some good steps forward. What now we need to do is to complete that by having complete overhaul of the electoral system, because this is the elephant in the room. How do we get the managers of our electoral system, starting with the commissioners? I think we have been living in denial that we need to do it professionally. That the very flashy kind of reasoning and suggestions that we don't need people who are politicians, we need some technical people, we need a panel that is going to interview people. But by the end of the day, you are still getting Kenyans to this commission. Then why don't we just accept that there's nobody in this country who is non-partisan? Let us accept and admit that we are a diverse society, and we are a society that is probably politically divided into 2 equal parts, or almost equal parts, and then give those 2 equal parts, or almost equal parts, the chance to come up with the commissioners. And then we go down to the secretariat and reform it, because a lot of the problems that we encountered were a creation, of the secretariat. So we need to go, not just to stop at the commission level, I mean the commissioners, but go deep down to see who are involved in terms of the personnel, in terms of managing the electoral process. But where I agree with you is that time is not on our side. Because if you have to reform the secretariat, you need to do it early enough, especially for a general election, to have the new team acquaint themselves to the processes, to the electoral process, to conduct a credible electoral process.
And let's talk about accountability, because you've mentioned that Supreme Court ruling that annulled the 2017 presidential election. The first one, of course, the second one was upheld. And they talk about illegalities, irregularities. And we've not seen movement in as far as accountability, because those happened within IEBC. So as we talk about having a new team, have we dealt with those problems so that this does not happen again?
Yeah, that's why I was saying that these are reforms. You know, again, as politicians, you mentioned it rightly. As politicians, we cannot go to the IEBC and start prescribing or the electoral system, whether it is IT or whatever, the technical aspects of it. We just need the right people there to do that. So what we can deal with as politicians or as leaders is to get a commission in place, a commission that is credible enough that we would entrust with the responsibility of coming up with processes that are foolproof, processes that are credible enough, whose outcome would not be challenged in court. So to me, I think that is where we would go to. But I agree with you that those challenges are still with us, are still existing. You can see now the CEO, whom I thought should have left a long time if we are conscious. The problem in this country, we put people into position, people who have no conscience, people who have no integrity, people who have nothing really to protect. Insisting to stay in a position that you, even yourself, you see is untenable, is the lowest that one can go in terms of holding a public office. You should realize that now it is not working for me. Like when we were approaching the last election, after the High Court ruling, the Supreme Court ruling, it was my view that Chiloba would just voluntarily offer that if I am the one causing this country a mess, because even lives were lost, Sophia, remember. And this is something that people forget, that your action can cause destruction of a country. So, but you see, Chiloba held on to his office, and I think he was being cheered on by some of his godfathers, to the extent that he lost reasoning. Now he had to be removed from office. But even that, his removal from office is not curing the problem. Look at what Public Accounts Committee is now following up. Cases of fraud. If people who cannot even see money, who can steal money that is given to them to conduct election, how do you expect those people to conduct a credible election, especially of a president?
All right. Finally, briefly, you talk about these commissioners that are in office, 3 of them, the chair and the 2, must go. How do they go before their terms are over? Do you give them a package like the last team?
You know, let me tell you, there is no, to me, democracy is expensive. And I will tell you, they would go just the same way others have gone before. Even the Kivuitu Commission, its term had not ended. And there were even more, but they left. The Sakasan Commission, the time had not ended, but they left, and there were more than 3. Now, these 3, we have even been helped by others quitting, although I think they thought they were messing up the system, but I think they realized very late. I wanted to use a very strong term, but I don't want to call them foolish, but I think they were misadvised or misinformed, so they left. Now we have only 3. Those 3, we will also find a way of letting them, releasing them for other assignments as we engage seriously on who should run. But obviously even them, I think Chebukati also must be aware that really he cannot continue holding on to that position for long.
Many thanks. Leader of Minority in the National Assembly and the chairperson of the Orange Democratic Movement, John Badi, with us here on The Big Story. So we will wait to see. You've had their ODM, IPPG is the approach they'd like to see put in place in as far as a new commission being put up. But the issues that continue to plague not only the electoral body, but the election cycle in Kenya, will those be resolved? Will there be a solution? We'll have to wait and see, Michelle.
All right, many thanks, our lead reporter Sophia Nune there. And on the short night, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be speaking to 2 elections experts, Marcus Agenga from the Election Observation Group, ELOG, as well as lawyer Felix Odhiambo, who is also the Executive Director at Electoral Law and Governance Institute for Africa. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us on The Big Story tonight. Felix, I'd like to begin with you. The basis of this conversation tonight is the kickstart of the conference on global elections system that began today. The aim of the conference is to enhance democracy through free and fair elections. But the big irony is that the Kenyan Parliament, 1 year after the elections, is there to institute a process to reinvigorate the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The question is this a case of sincere democracy, especially for Kenya's political class?
Thank you very much, and I think the theme of the conference, as you have outlined, clearly underscored the important role that elections plays in a democracy. And that is a point that some of us have said repeatedly and consistently over a long period of time. Even if, I mean, if you look at our constitution, the 2010 constitution, and even if you look at the 9 thematic areas under the Building Bridges initiative, the convergent point is elections. We fix our election, we fix our electoral process, then you can almost say that we would be on that path to prosperity and consolidation of democracy and good governance in this country. Elections or democratic elections still remains the weakest link. But whereas I concede and I agree with the fact that one of the problems that we've had in our election since 1992 is actually on election management and administration. We've had 6 multi-party elections since 92, and within which time we've had 6 different electoral commissioners or commission, managing those elections. We had the Chesoni Commission, we had the Kivuitu Commission, we had the IPPG that was referred to by the Honorable Mbadi there. We had the IEBC Commission that managed the 2010 referendum. We had Medizaka IEBC that managed the 2013 elections, and now we have the Chebukati Commission, which is the commission that managed the 2017 election. I think with that development, it should be apparent to everybody that merely changing personnel that is not the answer to is not the solution to the problem. We have far more fundamental problems in our electoral process that needs to be addressed in a holistic manner that goes beyond mere change of personnel. And we've seen it all. We've changed personnel in the past. We have promulgated a new constitution. We have tinkered with election regulations and adjusted the Elections Act, and yet we still remain with the same problems insofar as election management and administration is concerned. I've had an opportunity to engage with this commission, and I agree, make no mistake about it. I think the problem after the 4 commissioners resigned, I think the responsibility and the onus is on Parliament and the executive to ensure that the vacancies that were left by those departing commissioners are filled. And maybe there is an opportunity here where we can actually discuss as a country what kind of commission do we have. Was there an opportunity by the 4 vacancies? Do we want, for example, to reintroduce the debate and the discussions that we've had in the past? For example, now that we have 3 commissioners, even if we were to allow political parties to nominate in the manner of the IPPG, is this a perfect opportunity where you can have a combination of independent commission and commissioners nominated by political parties? This is also a time for us to discuss the debate about part-time and full-time commission.
All right, let me bring in Marcus for a moment. And so both the majority and minority leaders in the Senate seem to agree that Parliament needs to be at the forefront in ensuring that Kenya gets a credible commission that will oversee the 2022 general election. In your view, has both Parliament and the executive been proactive in ensuring changes within the electoral body?
Thank you, Michelle. I think Parliament has and of course, as the Honorable Mbadi has indicated there is a failure because it is the institution that is mandated by the Constitution to implement, to make laws and also to make enabling legislation to ensure that we have proper structures in place. Now, we have the first commissioner resigning just a few days before the fresh presidential election. We had 3 more commissioners resigning in April this year. Right. And they have done nothing to ensure that we bring on board new commissioners. So, it is a failure right on their face. And of course, I think there is need for them to move with the speed to ensure that these gaps are filled. Of course, because, Michelle, you realize that elections is not an event. Elections are a cycle. And so every cycle has got different activities that need to be carried out. Now, when you have a dysfunctional commission and you still expect IEBC to discharge its constitutional mandate in all honesty, we are setting IEBC for failure. So I think there's need for Parliament to move with the speed and put in place a selection panel to kickstart the process of replacing the commissioners. And I agree with Felix. I think I don't think we need to, every electoral cycle, we change the commission. There are two issues that are prominent there. One, there is need for predictability and stability in an electoral management body. Every cycle you will change, so there is no even institutional memory. And I think even as the handshake, if you will, we are now in a post-election period. We are sobering up, and I think this is the correct time to begin such conversations in a very sober way.
All right, Felix, well, let's get back to some of those proposals that have been given, especially by the opposition. One there that has been spoken by one John Mbadi is using the 1997 IPPG model, in which members are nominated by the main opposing political parties so as to create balance, so to speak, within the electoral body. This is just one of the proposals that has been given to further have a more sustainable electoral body. What are the pros and cons of this proposal?
First of all, let me say that I concede to the fact that the IPPG Commission, ECK, Electoral Commission of Kenya, that managed the 2002 election, and I mean, that is probably the best managed or well-run elections that we've had in our democracy since 1992. And there were a number of advantages to that, in the sense that, given the polarized nature of our politics, by allowing opposition political parties to nominate commission, it gave the commission the semblance of predictability and certainty, and indeed political acceptance that Marcus was referring to. So I think that was the main advantage. The commissioners, because they were drawn from different parts of, different political parties, were able to checkmate on each other. But let us not forget, strictly speaking, before the IPPG, we had 11 commissioners that were nominated by President Moi. And when they were nominated, it was an independent, they became sort of an independent commission. So that commission was actually a combination of the independent model, which had the Kivuitus and the likes, other commissioners, sit in that commission, augmented or complemented by nominees by political parties. So it had its advantages. Given our polarized nature and our context, I think it should be considered. And like I pointed out already, if we can consider a combination of an independent commissioners and the nominees by political parties, that is one option that we should consider. But let us not forget, in Mozambique, in the last election in 2015, they came up with exactly the IPPG model, where Frelimo and Renamo nominated commissioners to serve in the Electoral Commission of Mozambique. And it was a disaster. Soon after, the ruling party, Frelimo, bought all the opposition nominated electoral commissioners. And the rest is history. So the advantage, pros and cons, and I think constituting of an electoral commission is based on in the context of that particular country. But yes, that is one option that this country should consider. All
right, Felix Odhiambo and Marcus Agenga in studio for the big story. The conversation tonight revolving around election reforms. Do stay with us. The conversation continues after this short break.